Howard Hughes. He was an eccentric millionaire who would later become America's first billionaire. He gained his wealth from his father, who owned a successful drilling tool business in Texas. He would later found Hughes Productions, which produced movies from the 1920s up until the 1960s. He also founded Hughes Aircraft Corporation, which although produced only a few aircraft compared to its competitors, was very innovative in what aircraft it made, and its aircraft made history. He also was one of the owners of TWA, Trans World Airlines, which was a successful airline from the early 20s up until 2001, when it was bought out by American Airlines. Howard Hughes was a very interesting man, from his childhood to his adult life, where he owned a movie producing studio where he made many movies, mostly about aviation, which was his passion, causing him to own Hughes Aircraft Corporation. From there, people are fascinated by his innovations in the aviation industry. And later in life, his mental illness that was his downfall. Howard Hughes was born as son of a wealthy Texan in Houston, Texas. His father had invented a drill bit for mining oil. Through this, his father made a fortune. After many years, when Howard was a teen, both of his parents died, leaving him to vast wealth that his father had accumulated. Howard was also left the tool company, which helped him gain even more wealth throughout his years. Howard loved movies, so while an employee he hired managed his father's company, which had by now given him a wealth of over $75 million, went to go make movies. Out of the many movies he produced, including The Outlaw, Scarface, Two Arabian Nights, along with one of his most famous movies was his most expensive. Going millions over budget, Hell's Angels also killed several people. The movie was about World War I dogfights, which were aerial combat where fighter aircraft were pit against each other. Two of those that were killed were actors whose planes had crashed during the filmmaking. However, later the movie had become a success, and this was only the beginning of Hughes's fame. Hughes wanted more than fame that he acquired from the movie business. After making several movies, Howard began to create the Hughes Aircraft Corporation. Located in Glendale, California, he was most famous for three aircraft: the Hughes H-1 Racer. This aircraft started soon after his movie Hell's Angels, where Howard wanted to build a fast aircraft. He started with a biplane, but ripped it apart trying to create a new aircraft. Several years later, he built the H-1. In 1935, he broke the world speed record at 352.39 miles per hour during a low pass over an airfield. Later he would build the XF reconnaissance aircraft. It was a twin-engine, counter-rotating propeller aircraft that was built for the U.S. Air Force during the Second World War. He did not complete it during the Second World War, however, and in 1947, during one of his test flights, he would crash the aircraft. This crash was due to when one of the engines had failed, causing a power imbalance resulting in an unrecoverable roll that resulted in the destruction of several mansions in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles. This crash also was the trigger of mental illness for Howard. His main illness was isolationism and germophobia. but he had a general fear of living outside of his home. The aircraft caught on fire, and Howard barely escaped alive. He also was famous for building the H-4 Hercules, better known as the Spruce Goose. This aircraft was a flying boat powered by 8 massive propellers. It was meant to transport troops and military equipment across the Atlantic during the Second World War, avoiding the U-boat problem that many ships had to suffer through. On November 2nd, 1947, he proved that the government funds he had received were used to make an aircraft that actually flew. The aircraft took off from San Francisco Harbor and flew at a maximum speed of 135 miles an hour, skimming above the water, but still classified as flight. Later in life, Howard would buy TWA, Trans World Airlines, giving him a larger fortune. He bought this in 1939, and shortly after, without the company's approval, bought 40 Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellations. He ordered them in secret and purchased each one at a base price of $720,000 at a total of $28,800,000. He personally paid for these aircraft out of his own wealth, and often would keep one for his own private use that would be taken out of service of the airline's routes. Reluctantly, as the jet age came into swing, Howard was forced to purchase Convair 880s and Boeing 707s. Later, TWA also became one of the first airlines to acquire the 747. This was also famous for the TWA Flight 800 when a 747 exploded off the coast of New York. Howard had thought that jet engines were disruptive and were not right. He was a firm believer that pistons were the best way to go, but by this point, piston engines had become obsolete. Towards his end years, he bought most of Las Vegas. He owned more than half after he had purchased Las Vegas Inn called the Desert Inn. According to the story told by Hughes, he purchased the hotel after he arrived to find no rooms available. This estate would later be sold after his death.